Welcome to Only in America. I'm Ali Nurani.
Only in America.
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 This week, from the Deep South, welcoming the stranger.
Our love for them reflects God's love for us because He poured out His love on us and we did nothing to deserve it, but we are supposed to show the same love to others. The way we do that here in Alabama, in Montgomery particularly, we pour it out on the families who come and we just love them and it shines.
And my guest this week introduces us to the 1944 children's book, The 100 Dresses.
This book was published in the 1940s, but it made a lasting impression on me. So this story of an immigrant family is so powerful still today. It's a story about immigration and bullying and forgiveness, and I wish we could make it required reading for families and schools today.
From the National Immigration Forum, I'm Ali Nurani. One of the things I really enjoy about Only in America is the opportunity to ask people why they care about immigrants and immigration. You've probably heard me ask these questions before. Was there a moment that led them to think differently about immigration? Where in their life did that moment take place? My guest this week, Susan West, had one of the most intriguing answers to this question. She told me about The 100 Dresses, a children's book published in 1944 that tells the story of Wanda Petronsky, a young girl in Connecticut who came from Poland. Wanda is teased at school for many things: her unusual last name, the section of town where she lives, and the faded blue dress that she's always wearing, even as she insists that she has 100 dresses, quote, all lined up in my closet.
Tell us, how many dresses did you say you had hanging up in your closet? 100, said Wanda. 100? Exclaimed all the girls incredulously, and the little girls would stop playing hopscotch and listen. Yeah, 100, all lined up, said Wanda. Then her thin lips drew together in silence. What are they like? All silk, I bet, said Peggy. Yeah, all silk, all colors. Velvet, too? Yeah, velvet, too, 100 dresses, repeated Wanda stolidly. All lined up in my closet. Then they'd let her go. And then, before she'd gone very far, they couldn't help bursting into shrieks and peals of laughter.
Now, I don't want to give away the story, but much to the surprise of her classmates, Wanda actually owned 100 dresses, and as a result, she won a class competition. But in a letter to the class, Wanda's father had news.
Dear teacher, my Wanda will not come to your school any more. Now we move away to big city. No more holler Polak. No more ask why funny name. Plenty of funny names in the big city. Yours truly, Jan Petronsky.
The book's author, Evelyn Estes, based the story on her Connecticut childhood during World War I. But she wasn't the bullied girl, Wanda. She probably was Maddie, one of the girls who taunted Wanda. That's according to a letter the author's daughter, Helena Estes, wrote for a recent edition of the book. Here's an excerpt of Helena's letter.
My mother never forgot the little girl who had been so badly treated. She herself knew what it was like to be poor as a child, to always be cold in winter, to wear clothes passed down to her by her sister. What could she do so many years later, my mother wondered, to set things right? To reach out to the girl who had stood lonely and silent against the red brick wall of the school. Well, she thought, the one thing she could do was to write her story, and so The 100 Dresses was born.
The 100 Dresses was written while most of the world was in a battle against Nazi Germany. Years later, as the nation struggled to end racial segregation, the same themes resonated with a young Susan. The book tackles the othering of immigrants, encourages one to stand against injustice, and ultimately, the importance of asking for forgiveness. Susan, who read The 100 Dresses as a child growing up in 1960s Montgomery, told me the book was her introduction to a person from another country. If she were in charge of reading curriculum, she'd proclaim the 100 dresses required reading in classrooms across the country. You know, I'd have to agree.
Support for the National Immigration Forum comes from the James Irvine Foundation, expanding opportunity for the people of California, and from the Carnegie Corporation of New York, established in 1911 by Andrew Carnegie to promote the advancement and diffusion of knowledge and understanding.
From the National Immigration Forum, I'm Ali Nirani. Now, if I were to ask you to imagine a place where Americans welcome immigrants, Alabama may not be the first place to come to mind. But as my colleague Alan Cross, a Southern Baptist pastor who for years called Alabama home, wrote last week in the New York Times, time and again during my work as a pastor, I've encountered people with strong anti-immigrant policy positions who, nevertheless, opened their homes, churches, wallets, and arms to immigrants in their communities. Alan goes on to describe churches in multiple communities around the state where faith is guiding people towards compassion on immigration. He writes, "What gives me hope is that this openness isn't just on the individual or congregational level. It is spreading across communities as their faith overtakes their fear." Which brings us to Alabama native Susan West. The retired school teacher who directs the Conversational English Ministry for the Montgomery Baptist Association shared with me her story of helping immigrants integrate into the South. From sharing food to learning the language, Susan's story is an example of America at its best. Susan, thank you so much for joining today. I am really, really looking forward to this conversation.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
So before we talk about how you got involved in working with immigrants, tell me a little bit about yourself. Who is Susan West?
I have lived in Alabama all my life. And as a child in the neighborhood where I grew up, there was one immigrant family who lived down the street, and they had a Greek grandma, a Yaya, and Yaya didn't speak much English, but she made food that was delicious, and the smells of those foods when you passed the house drew us all in, and we loved the Yaya in our neighborhood. So that was my first experience and only experience as a child with someone who didn't look or sound like everyone else around me. And then maybe in the 4th or 5th grade, I borrowed a library book that made a lasting impression on me. You and your listeners may know about this book, The 100 Dresses. Have you heard of it?
No, I haven't.
This book was published in the 1940s by Evelyn Estes, The 100 Dresses. And it won a Newbery Honor in 1945, but it made a lasting impression on me. It is the story about a little girl named Wanda Petronsky, a Polish girl in a town in Connecticut. And she was ridiculed by her classmates for being different and for having an odd last name. But most of the story is about she wears the same faded blue dress every day to school. So this story of an immigrant family is so powerful still today. It's a story about immigration and bullying and forgiveness. And I wish we could make it required reading for families and schools today. So a Yaya, a Greek grandma, and this little book were all I had in my account of experiences growing up. And so then I went to college, and of course there were exchange students. Now our universities have visiting scholars and lots of international students. But I married, became an educator, taught school for 26 years. We had and raised 3 sons. Our sons now have wives and children, and now I'm the grandmother. I'm not called Yaya, but I'm a grandmother, and we have 5, what I like to call them, grand blessings, not grandchildren, grand blessings. So when I retired from teaching, I gathered Asian children to tutor them in English around my kitchen table. And interesting thing, their moms would gather for coffee and conversation. You see, the automotive industry had come to Alabama, and Alabama was becoming more diverse. And there was a program that's been going on for many years at Maxwell Air Force Base. Maxwell invites 100 international officers and their families to move here for 1 year for officer training. So these families arrive in June and come and live in Montgomery for 1 year. I began volunteering with a group who welcomes those who come here. And there is an English program that I work with. It is 40 years old. So 40 years ago, it began to welcome and provide English classes for those military spouses and many others now who call Montgomery home, a way to introduce them to Southern culture and traditions. And so this program is what I work with, and it is called Conversational English. It's more than 70 volunteers, ecumenical, more than 35 churches help and assist. So fast forward 40 years later, now this program, our program, has 300 adults who represent more than 49 countries on any given week. And they come to practice English, have conversations and coffee, gathered around tables. Our program has some features, I think, that make us unique. There are many ESL programs, I think, scattered all over. But we provide preschool child care and transportation, and everything we do is free of charge. So since many families have one vehicle, and often the breadwinner, or in the military family's case, it's the husband takes the one vehicle onto the base for officer school. So many of our families often say the only time the spouse leaves her home during the week is when a church van arrives in the parking lot of the apartment building or home to take them to church, where we are housed in a church. So that transportation and childcare take a lot of time and are a big responsibility, but to organize and provide good childcare with trained people, but it's so worth it.
Right. So when you started that first class to teach Asian children, did you have what led you to do that? Why did you take that first step?
Well, as an educator, it's in your blood, and I always taught kindergarten and first grade. So when I retired, who we are is so wrapped up in our title or in our profession. And so none of those grand blessings had arrived yet. And I had empty nest, and I had retired from teaching school, so it was natural. And those families sort of just found me. And it was just a good fit like a glove.
And do you keep in touch with those first families?
Oh, yes. Now, many of them have returned to their countries, but those who are still here may show up at my doorstep or front door at holidays, or when they remember something, or when they're passing by in my neighborhood, and will just come and knock or send me a message and say, my child made the honor roll, or we're now on the soccer team, come to a game,
And so the larger program now, why did the church take on the program and kind of serve as kind of the home base, if you will, for the conversations and the education?
Good question. It was housed in a church because there were empty classrooms during the week, and it just was a good fit. And then as we needed transportation, we decided to try to use church vans, or buses, and each church only had one or two. And for insurance purposes, you had to use a driver who was a church member and was had church insurance. So the program has always been welcomed in a church, and it's only had two homes. It moved to a larger, different church in our area back in the 80s, I believe, and it is just growing and growing. And like I said, many different people help to make it work.
So you had said that the English classes, the English classes help newcomers understand Southern culture and tradition. What does that mean?
Well,
can I come and take some cooking classes?
We need you to come participate and understand Southern traditions and Southern culture.
Sign me up.
So one thing we do to welcome and introduce them to that is in the summer, we organize and host summer activities, primarily for those 100 military families who are coming in, but anyone can participate. Any of our families can join us. So we provide outings like family friendly and free places that they and safe that they can go to while they're in Montgomery, as long as they live here, like community garden, parks, a visit to the fire station, museums, a farmer's market. And then one way we introduce them to that culture is we have a Taste of Alabama, where we introduce them to foods grown, made, and known in our state. So that's when you need to come. Things like grits, and fried green tomatoes and watermelon and biscuits and peach jam and low country boil that's from the Mobile area. And of course, not just Southern, but we explain how and where we got the tradition from. And so what that leads to is that we gather in our homes and their homes throughout the year to taste and prepare foods. So there's that aroma, the spices and the cultures colliding, and it's beautiful.
And do you think it works in the other direction? Meaning, does the program help the church and the broader community in Montgomery, who's been there for generations, understand the changes that come with immigration?
Exactly. I think when people turn off Fox News and CNN and stop watching even local news and watch the cars drive up in our neighborhoods or watch the church vans go by to transport these families, I think many people are realizing that we can learn so much from each other and that we all have so much to offer. Yeah.
And is there a particular story or someone you met who maybe it's a family that you helped learn English, or a family that was, really struggling with the changes that were happening around them? Are there kind of stories that stick in your mind of, okay, you know what, this is worth it?
Oh, so many. How long do we have?
Oh.
So many. I will tell you about one mom, a mother, as she was picking her child up after classes, and she did happen to be a military spouse, but I've asked others who are here from other countries, I've asked them, just trying to figure out if they think the same thing, and they do. But a mom told me one day when she picked her child up from the preschool hallway in this church where we're housed, and she said, ma'am, we smell our children each week when they leave classes. Well, I'm a troubleshooter, problem solver sort of director, and that horrified me. You smell our children? What do you mean you smell them? I was thinking, what is that smell? Should I go buy Lysol? What's the problem? But she saw my face and she said, oh, no, ma'am, you don't understand me. Listen, let me explain. It's a good smell. She said, we smell our children after class each week. It's the smell of love. It's the smell of American love. Now, you and I know that that scent, that smell, is probably the shampoo or the soap or lotion that the teachers in preschool were wearing each week. But that scent lingers on the children and on their clothes. So isn't that a beautiful description of what we do?
Yeah.
And the same thing when we leave their homes or they leave ours. It may be the smell of fried green tomatoes, or it may be the smell of Pakistani spices, of a dish that I even have trouble pronouncing but love to eat.
Try me out.
Gulab. See, I can't even tell. See, you don't even know because I'm butchering. I'm butchering it.
What's in the dish? Give me a hint here.
It's sticky, round balls of deliciousness.
Gulab Jamun.
That's what I said.
Yep.
Gulab Jamun. Gulab Jamun. Oh my gosh. Yes. So, or standing around a table, making eye contact with a Chinese immigrant family as they teach me how to make dumplings. Mm-hmm. And the whole family and all the generations would work together and do it. And I said, so not just grandma in the kitchen or mom making the dumplings. Said no, that everyone in the family stands around and does it together and makes eye contact. So we can learn a lot from each other. We really can.
So let's say, there are pastors across the South who are listening to this conversation. What would you like them to take away from the program that you and others have built in Montgomery as a way to enrich Southern culture, Southern life, and the church in the South?
Well, our families tell us that we provide a place of peace, a place where they feel all are welcome and safe and valued. And so when they come into our program, there are those with green cards and visas. There are some with no papers, some who are lost in the sea of immigration system, university students, and of course here in Montgomery, unique because the military spouses participate. But I think we are a way to provide peace in an unfamiliar place. And if we can do it, so can other communities and other groups. Our families often say to us, why? Why do you do this? Why do you volunteer? Why do you love us? Why do you go to this trouble or to all this effort? But we just say, our love for them reflects God's love for us because He poured out His love on us and we did nothing to deserve it, but we are supposed to show the same love to others. And the way we do that here in Alabama, in Montgomery particularly, we pour it out on the families who come. And we just love them, and it shines. It shines through our teachers and in our van drivers.
The van drivers must have such amazing stories, right? Because they strike up that informal conversation.
They are our best, and I tell them they are our first and the last impression.
Yeah,
so watch what they do. And they're funny because they try to understand and respect the cultures and the traditions and, what to do and what not to do. But a Southern gentleman, and we have women van drivers also, but it's our habit to hug, to reach out a hand to help you down the step, or to take your child from you and help you with something. So our families are very forgiving. We make lots of cultural and other mistakes, and and they love us anyway, and they keep coming. You can only imagine some of those stories.
Oh my! And what do you tell your grand blessings about this?
Oh, well, they're all under the age of 4 right now. So they watch me, and they have tried some interesting foods, and they've met lots of people already who are not like them, who don't look like them. But I think the most fun I'm having with our grand blessings right now is in this way is that when we're at a park in their communities, in their towns, it's like a magnet. If I'm at the park and there's a grandfather or a father from India, we connect immediately. And I'm swinging his child and he's swinging my grand blessing, and we're talking about his journey and what he's done. So I'm helping or modeling how to connect and just how to love on each other, no matter where we are or who we are.
So I want to go back to the book, 100 Dresses.
Yes.
When did you read that? How old were you, and what year do you think that was?
Maybe 4th grade.
Yeah.
And it was just a library book, but it's still in print. In fact, I bought several copies this past year to start giving. If I can't make this required reading, I can sure give it for gifts to a lot of people. and so that's how I roll.
So what year do you think you read it?
Oh, goodness.
Because you're like 35, so it's like,
So like 1968.
Yeah.
Maybe, yeah.
So, that was a really, really, really challenging time for the country, right? And
Right.
for the South.
Yes.
So for that book to leave, that kind of impression on you at that point in time, is really quite remarkable. Because, the world around everybody at that point was upside down.
Yes. But in our little cocoon in Alabama, I'm sorry to say, I wish it were different, but we were about to go through integration in Alabama. So when I was in 7th grade, we integrated, and that was huge. So beside this Greek family who lived down the street, and he was a professor at the university there in my hometown, but other than that experience and this little book, I knew nothing about immigration.
Yeah.
So thank goodness for a little book that I revisited years later and thought, that book is still in print, and I can remember the illustrations. I can remember the story. It's a delightful book, and I'm not going to be the spoiler because I want people to read it for themselves. But it's sad, but it's great, and it needs to be read, needs to be shared.
That's wonderful. Well, thank you for sharing. So, last question for you is the question I ask everybody, is that, to finish the sentence of only in America, ...
Only in America. I want to ask that to our families. I wonder what they would answer. I'm going to ask them. I'll have to email you and tell you what they say, but I'll try to answer it also. But won't it be interesting to see what our families would think about responding and answering that? Only in America can people from different backgrounds and different cultures gather around tables and smell like love, and it is so good. Only in America.
Thank you so much, and this was absolutely wonderful. I loved talking to you. I look forward to visiting, and we can have Gulab, Jamun, and barbecue.
And fried green tomatoes.
And fried green tomatoes.
And fried okra. Next time you're in Montgomery, I hope you will come visit. We need a warning label on our program. It's habit forming, because it really is. Because all of a sudden we cross that imaginary line, and we're not volunteers and we're not teachers. We're friends. They're the people we call, and we call them, they call us. They're true friends, but they're the ones sometimes who sit in waiting rooms for test results, or are the ones that come to the birth of a child, or school programs, or teacher conferences. So it's a lot more than just being a volunteer.
Yep.
Thank you for having me.
No, thank you. Thank you.
Read the book.
Susan West is the director of the Conversational English Ministry for the Montgomery Baptist Association in Montgomery, Alabama. She's an Alabama native and a retired teacher. For more on Susan, visit our website, immigrationforum.org. And while you're there, please subscribe to Only in America. Only in America is produced by Regina Medina and Emily Chow. Our sound editor is Megan Wetmore. Kathleen Farrell is executive producer, and me, I'm Ali Nurani. Thank you for listening to Only in America.